I'm in the Oak Grove Cemetery in St. Mary's, Georgia. This is the delightful little town that you would spend the night in if you were going to go to Cumberland Island, the national park. So yesterday I did the full day where I took the ferry, the 9 o'clock ferry, the first ferry, and then came back on the last ferry of the day at 4:45. So spent a full day there. Your other choices would be to camp there, which would, be some logistics. And there's a very, very, very fancy hotel, which I looked up was $795 a night. So that was a little too much for me, even though someone on the ferry told me that it's worth it because you get 3 gourmet meals. So I'll let you decide for yourself. Cumberland Island, in that vein, is famous for where John F. Kennedy Jr. got married. I don't know anything about that, nor did I visit the tiny little church, because the church is at the very, very top end of Cumberland Island, and I didn't want to ride my tiny little bike 18 miles to see that, and I would not have been able to do that in one day. So my trip was all about seeing the beach, seeing the Spanish moss, the trees, and then I came back at 4:45 at the end of the day, so that was like the longest you could spend in one day there, and I'm glad I spent all that time. If it had been a wet day or a miserable day, that'd be a little rough to spend that much time because there's not a lot of shelter at all on the island. For me, I was there in late February, and it was a beautiful day. It was like 67 all day and nice and sunny, so I had the perfect day. And I think I covered about 9 miles on my tiny little Zizo bike, which is a foldable bike, so the tires are a little tidy, so I'm not as fast as others would be. Tiny little tires. Can you see my tiny tire? Can you see my tiny tire? And it took me all day to cover those 9 miles. I stopped a lot and enjoyed the scenery and read the historic signs and all that kind of stuff. So for me, going slow, 9 miles was about perfect from the 9 o'clock ferry to the 4:45 ferry. On the ferry, when you're headed out, I think you might want to sit on the right side of the ferry if you can. That's probably a better view. You can see the island as you're coming in. And when you're leaving at the end of the day, maybe sit on the left side. Beautiful light at the end of the day. I took my bike. If you take your bike, you have to get out at Sea Camp Ranger Station, which is the second of the 2 ferry stops. And what I did is I got off at Sea Camp, head straight to the beach, and then I went south, which was nice for me that day because the wind was at my back. I saw some folks who did the other way, and they were walking against the wind, and that would be also rough. That would be pretty tough. Now I did do it at high tide, which I realized at the end of the day that riding on the beach would be better at low tide because that's when you have more sand that's kind of tough and hard. I ended up having to walk my bike for a lot of the part on the beach trip. I think this is not a pro tip because I did not know it, but if you ride your bike at low tide, it's a little bit easier because the sand is more compact. Maybe all you people that ride bikes on beaches already know that. I do believe that's the only strip of beach you're allowed to ride your bike on. Most of the folks who take their bike ride on the main road, and I'll come back to that later. And took a right at the Boardwalk, which is also part of the Dungeness Trail, which takes you to the Dungeness Ruins. One of the members of the Carnegie family had a house there, which burnt and is now a ruin. There's a lot of history on the island. Robert E. Lee's father was there for a while. There's a story that maybe Eli Whitney got the idea of the cotton gin on the island. Some people go to the island just for the history of rich people on the island, which I found a little weird. John F. Kennedy Jr. famously got married on the island. So some people go just to see the tiny little church that he got married in, which only has 8 pews. I did not see that. The ferry takes you to the south part of the island, and the tiny little church, which is a historic African-American church, is on the north part of the island, a distance of 18 miles. So I was no way going to be able to get to that in one day. From what I saw, there's only one way to get to the church, which is there's a tour company that does a little tour. I was talking to somebody on the ferry on the way back, and they take you to all the old rich people homes and give you that history. And they didn't even make it to the beach because they didn't have time, which I think is kind of incredible that they would go to this island and not see the beach on it. So anyway, that's a different kind of trip that I did not do. Once I was done with the Dangerous Ruins, I headed north on the main road. The main road is easy to ride your bike on, and it's beautiful. You get all sorts of trees with Spanish moss, and the trees have all sorts of weird limbs. There's a church bell. For whom does the bell toll? It does not toll for my video. The main road, as a couple cars that go by, maybe it's because I was in February, but I didn't see a lot. There's a couple people that live on the island, the National Park Service, the fancy hotel that's there, so they have some cars, but it's delightful to ride your bike on. I think that was one of my highlights of the day. There's feral horses on the island, like the one that's right behind me right now, who's just cruising down the main road. Now he's going down the National Park Service staff only road. Apparently he did not read the sign. On the main road, I rode it all the way past Sea Camp again to Old House Road, which is pretty close to Stafford Beach. I didn't make it to Stafford Beach. I kind of ran out of energy and time. I think if you were on a bike that didn't have tiny little tires, you could make it probably pretty easily there. But I enjoyed the Old House Road. That allowed you to see the side of the island where the river side of the island. So, it's a different sort of vibe on that side of the island. And that was all by myself there, which was nice. And from there I went back to Sea Camp with a tiny little stop at Little Grayfield Beach. This quiet graveyard is not as quiet as I thought it would be. So, there you go.